Renewal Commission. Roll call, please.
Here. Here.
Commissioner West? Here. Commissioner Neely?
Here.
Commissioner Norris?
Here.
Commissioner Crocker?
Here.
Commissioner Walters? Here. Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Chair Slack?
Here.
Commissioner Shaw?
We're short one. Is he supposed to be here or no? He's not. Okay. I didn't know where to fit it in, but I wanted to take an opportunity to congratulate one of our commissioners in his company. They've been named one of the top 100 growing businesses in Oregon by the Business Journal, and that's Funnelbox. Anyway, we'll move on to citizens' comments, and we do have one written citizen comment on your CRT there, which I assume copies are out for others if they want them on the table back there. And then our first would be Annie Howden. First. You just come right up here to the right here. And if you'll just give us your name and the city you reside in is all you need to do.
I'm Annie Howden, and I own Howden Art and Framing, which is on Washington Street just down from here. And I live in Redland but use the services of Oregon City, and I'm a business owner in Oregon City. My question to the commission is, what other direction do you want us to move in, if not the rivers? Is it one of vitality that draws people from neighboring communities to our city? We have friends and neighbors that want the services offered by the rivers. And as a business owner, I welcome the rivers because it will bring fresh eyes to see our city, and frankly, competition is a good thing in business. It's never been a negative thing. As far as jobs, the rivers will provide supplementary income, entry-level wages, and full living wages to our populace. The landfill, in my opinion, is a perfect place for the urban renewal site. The comprehensive multi-use center has social and financial pluses to the city. This could be the North End gateway to Oregon City. Consumers will see that Oregon City is a destination with character, history, and a future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, if we'll move on to future agenda items. Nothing there. Let's move on to our adoption of the agenda. One, I'd like to suggest Commissioner Crocker was going to actually not be able to be here because he has a commitment with college, but he would like to be here for item B, 5B. So if nobody has objections, we'll just move swap 5A and 5B. Any other agenda changes? Okay, let's move forward then with general business. Item 5A, item 5B, resolution number UR 10-02, design guidelines. Mr. Rentlaw.
Okay, thank you, Chair Slack. If you'll recall, this was last heard by the Urban Renewal Commission on March 17th. And at that time, there was a report from the subcommittee that has been working on this. And what you have in your packet are a number of items. I'm going to go briefly summarize all of those, and then at that point we can have questions. Again, the first thing you have is a resolution establishing the storefront design review criteria, and again, this was in response to the fact that we've had a number of applications, and this program is becoming more and more popular, so we wanted to look at more stringent criteria for approving grants. Your second attachment is the Urban Renewal Commission Storefront Improvement Program application processes and requirements. And what I've done there is I've left in red the changes that we've made to the original draft. And I'm going to summarize the major changes. Probably the first most significant grant is to increase the the grant from what was previously a maximum of $10,000 per application to $20,000 per application. The other thing that we've done is for projects that specifically bring facades back to their original historic condition, those type of projects would be eligible for grants of up to $40,000. And in all cases, there's a requirement of at least a 50% match from the private business. In terms of eligible improvements, you can see that we eliminated a couple things. One is landscaping, again, because that doesn't relate directly to the building. And we left awnings in, but excluded awnings that have tenant signs on the awning. And the thought there was that the life of an awning with a specific business on it isn't necessarily that long. So that's why that was deemed ineligible. If you go to the bottom of page 104 in red, you can see under a grant application process, again, this thing that we added where grants could be allowed above $20,000 if an applicant demonstrates that an improvement would restore a facade to its original design. And here we ask for submittal of photographs or other documentation showing the original storefront design. And then this provision also allows the option of submitting photographs of similar buildings designed by the same architect or buildings constructed during the same time period and style. And if you'll notice, that's still a discretionary decision as to whether a building would meet that criteria. Next, I'd like to point you to paragraph 4. And this has been an ongoing discussion as to how often the grants would be considered. And what we came out with was that the Urban Renewal Commission would consider grants 3 times per year, and it would be the intent of the Commission that the amounts of grants awarded in each one of those meetings would be equally distributed throughout the year. There was a lot of discussion on whether those dates should be specified in the process document, but I think this is a pretty administrative process, so there is a lot of flexibility as to when we could bring those forward. I think a lot of it depends on how many applications we get. And I think probably the last thing I want to point out on the last page is the addition of approval criteria. We came up with an evaluation sheet that ranks several criteria on a scale of 0 to 5, with 5 meaning that a proposal does an excellent job of meeting the criteria. And then we've gone the extra step of saying that as these projects are scored, they have to meet a score of 70% to be eligible for the grant. So attached, as the next page, is this one-page evaluations sheet, and you can see it lists criteria A through J, and criteria A through H are specific design elements that, as you go through your documents, you can see there's a lot of detailed, specific design elements that the grant proposal would be rated upon. And then also you see items I and J. Those are added. Item I is the recipient match value. In other words, if someone, a private property owner, puts an extraordinary amount of money into his proposal, then that would be scored potentially higher. And then J, item J is previous recipient, and that is if you had an applicant that was a previous recipient and did a very good job, he could be scored high for that. Or conversely, if he didn't do that good of a job, he could be scored not so high on that. So this gives a pretty, I think, comprehensive evaluation. And again, the thought on this is that as an application comes into the city for review, the staff would go through this evaluation sheet and then summarize the evaluation as part of your staff report. And it also allows you to do the same, to go through this evaluation sheet and come up with a score. So we try to be pretty systematic about it. And then as your final attachment, you can see a 33-page document of the specific design criteria. everything from building design to placement of doors and windows, roof lines, lighting, signs, awnings, and sustainability. I'm not going to go through those. You've had these in your packets before, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Oh, the other thing I wanted to add is we're hoping that this can get approved tonight. The intent was to have these guidelines in place for the next budget year, which starts July 1st.
Do you have any questions?
You got a list.
Well, here, Mr. Crawford.
Yeah, I sent an email, I guess it was last week, with a question about Section 2 of the resolution number UR10-2, stating that Urban Renewal Commission members may not apply for storefront grants unless they abstain from voting on all such grants for the fiscal year of which they apply. And Mr. Grentlaw called me and told me that was indeed for, I guess, to eliminate any perception that there was misconduct in the Urban Renewal storefront grants. It seems, I don't know exactly why it's in there, but it seems to me that it's directed clearly at me, because I'm the only one who's actually applied for and benefited from the grants and sitting on the commission. So it seems like some insinuations are being made, and I'd really like to set the record straight. So, to borrow a phrase from Commissioner Zecita, please allow me to indulge myself here for a minute. T5 Equity is the organization I'm associated with that has received 5 urban renewal grants totaling plus or minus $50,000 over the last 5 years. 2 of those were awarded before I was a member of the Urban Renewal Commission. 3 of the 5 buildings awarded grants were, for all intents and purposes, blighted and vacant. Since the work has been done on those buildings, there's been a massive increase in property tax revenue. Each of the properties we've rehabbed has seen an increase in property taxes of over 100%. Our first building, the McCall building, 712 Main Street, taxes went from under $3,500 in 2005 to over $7,500 in 2006, a difference of $4,000 a year. So over the last 5 years, it's more than generated twice what was awarded in the grant. It can be safe to assume that all the storefront grants that I've been involved with will more than pay for themselves and will generate additional increment for decades to come. In regards to the direct economic development, which is indeed the true goal of an urban renewal district, the 5 buildings that we've rehabbed that we've been involved with has attracted the equivalent of over 70 full-time jobs to Main Street in 14 new businesses and organizations. Much of that, mind you, during a recession. According to the stats from the National Main Street Organization, each of those districts we can safely assume spend on average of plus or minus 15% of their gross annual income on services and goods in the downtown core. So at a conservative average of $30,000 a year in annual salary, that equals $4,500 a year per job in goods and services downtown, or over $300,000 a year in new economic activity downtown. My primary business, Funnelbox, has donated over $40,000 in money, time, and resources to help initiate the Blue Collar Creative Project and produce a recruitment video for the downtown core. T5 Equities donates office space every month to Main Street, Oregon City, in one of the buildings that received the grant, and donates an additional $2,000 a year in cash to the organization that has proven to be so valuable in the city's efforts to revitalize the urban renewal district. In the 4.5 years in Oregon City, it's fairly safe to assume that the companies I am associated with have directly and indirectly benefited from the grants, have been responsible for well over $1.2 million in economic activity in the urban renewal district. The amount of time, money, and resources I've invested in the urban renewal district far outweigh any direct benefits I've received and or ever will ask for from the Urban Renewal Agency. If I can remind you, I'm the only member of URC who is actually working in the Urban Renewal District every single business day, and who has actually done what we're asking grant applicants to do. I've learned what works well, and I've learned what doesn't work so well. Yet, Commissioner Smith is clearly pointing me out to assert that because of my experience, I should be excluded from the voting process on grant applications should I want to continue to do the important work of economic development for the city of Oregon City in the urban renewal area. You know, most smart leaders I know encourage and support their top performers. They don't try to throw roadblocks in front of them. You want to take the person on the committee with the most direct experience utilizing storefront grant applications out of the process of awarding them. I've been beyond reproach in each and every grant application that I've been involved with. And the current protocol of recusing oneself from any discussion and or vote on any item that may personally benefit a commission member is a time-tested and widely accepted standard. I fail to see any material benefit from the amendment that's being proposed. It seems to me that you're much more concerned about perception than you are for actually doing what's right and most beneficial to the citizens for which you promise to serve. That said, you know, maybe I am out of touch. Maybe perception is more important than actually helping to grow the economic prosperity of the city. And if that's the case, if we are more concerned about perception, then we probably need to take this a step further and make sure that any urban renewal commissioner who has any association with anyone who may apply for a storefront grant not vote on storefront grant applications. That would include Commissioner Slack, because he's a building owner in the URA, Commissioner Peterson, because he's a realtor who works in the URA, Commissioners Neely, North, and West, because they all frequent eating and drinking establishments in the URA, and certainly Commissioner Nacita, because he is a known friend and acquaintance of Phil Yates, another property owner in the URA. As you can see, this is a real slippery slope, and if we want to be more concerned about perception than real economic development, we need to think a little more seriously about this amendment that I truly feel is aimed directly at me. But again, that's just my opinion.
I'll add that I also live in the URA district too.
Commissioner Neely?
It's not what I'm going to speak to. My understanding is what's really before us is essentially you recuse yourself when you actually have a grant that's before the commission that benefits you directly. Is that correct?
That's been the standard practice.
Yes, and that's what we've got here.
No, the proposal is more rigorous than that.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with I agree with you, Mr. Crocker. And I think you've been an example of what is required, that you actually, when the issue comes up, you recuse yourself, you don't even speak to the issue. If there's somebody else that you feel needs spoke to, as I recall, somebody else is speaking to it and not yourself. I don't think that restriction should be in there either. If you're denying the capability of a member of this body to, or excuse me, if we, it sounds personal, I know. If we are going to deny the capability of a member here to act on any grant application simply because that individual's acted on, has grant applications either in the past or may in the future, I don't think that's appropriate at all. I think we're duty bound to look at each one of those on their merit. I think we have, but we're going to have to prioritize them as we see what the merit is, because I think the demand is going to increase beyond our capability of funding them. I personally think I had to be in a position, irrespective of any associations I have of any member of this commission, make an independent and I hope and I believe unbiased assessment as to what those priorities were. And I don't think that word should be in here as well.
Commissioner Smith?
I actually entered in to talk about some of the other questions, but I'll answer that question, or at least address it. This was an issue that I brought up a long time ago, but the reason that it's in this version, it had nothing to do with me at all. In fact, this is a conversation that the entire committee has had, which I haven't pushed. I kind of let it go as an issue. But the issue came up again in the terms of the fact that when we are evaluating these grants, if we're weighting certain grants against other grants, that if a commissioner serves on this commission and votes against certain grants and also applies for a grant, their vote is weighing certain projects against their own very projects. And that could affect projects for the entire year, because if money's not spent in a given cycle, it will carry over to the next. And so that's the issue and the discussion that took place. It was not driven by me. I believe that the attorney also was, I think that, I mean, this question came up, and I think this version is based on answers that, I didn't try this, I've already seen this version until I got it in print form, and we, so.
Yeah, thank you. If you'd like me to address it, Bill Kleisman. I don't believe I've seen that version, so I don't know exactly what the language is. What I can tell you is that there are two things that every member needs to worry about: actual conflict of interest and potential conflict of interest. This is something you probably all know, but it never hurts to be reinforced. An actual conflict of interest is something that will be directly isn't in the language of statute. An actual conflict of interest is an action or decision, the effect of which would be to the private pecuniary benefit or detriment of the person or a person's business. If you're met with an actual conflict of interest, you must recuse yourself, cannot take part in deliberations. I think the case of a grant that you're applying for, clearly that's a direct conflict of interest. However, when you're acting on somebody else's grant, there's no definitive benefit or detriment from approving or denying that decision, because you, as somebody else who may be applying for the same grant, still may or may not get it. It is not the effect of which would be to the private pecuniary benefit. It may increase your chances, but it is not a direct pecuniary benefit to you. It may increase your chances because the pool has been diminished.
I'm just curious how you address the detriment side of that equation, because it could be to somebody else's detriment.
Absolutely, it could be to somebody else's detriment, but that doesn't affect your conflict of interest. The conflict of interest looks directly to you. Right, it says, an action or decision or recommendation by a person acting in capacity as a public official, the effect of which would be to the private pecuniary benefit or detriment of the person or the person's company. So the fact that there's a detriment to somebody else really doesn't matter. The question is whether you as a public official or your business is going to have a direct pecuniary benefit or detriment. And the fact that the pool may be diminished or may be increased by your action isn't to your private pecuniary benefit. It may be, and that's where you get into the potential conflict of interest, which is defined as an action or decision by a public official, the effect of which could be to the private pecuniary benefit or detriment of the person or the person's relatives or businesses. That you're getting a little closer, and I think that probably fits into it, because when you do diminish the pool, that could eventually lead to your pecuniary benefit. However, there's an exemption. It says an action in the person's official capacity which would affect to the same degree a class consisting of all inhabitants of the state, or a smaller class consisting of an industry, occupation, or other group, including one of which in which the person or the person's relatives or business is involved in. So there's an argument that it's a detriment to the entire pool, and so that there's a class exemption from that potential conflict of interest. I've discussed this very briefly with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission when Mr. Drentlaw brought it up to me. They thought on the initial discussion that this probably does fit in a class, but there is, they didn't make any official determination. There are some provisions that allow for an actual formal opinion that takes a month or two to do that. We can seek that to sort of dot the I's and cross the T's as far as what this applies. But I don't think there's a requirement that a person who is applying for grants recuse themselves from voting on other people's grants. Now, just because it's not a requirement doesn't mean that the Urban Renewal Commission couldn't make a policy decision that they want to take it even a step further.
I just want to ask, is the wording here to that effect?
As I understand the wording, it is that the Urban Commission may not apply for storefront grants unless they abstain from voting on all such grants for the fiscal year in which they apply. I don't believe that is required by the state's conflict of interest statutes.
Okay,
I'm still.
Commissioner Smith.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure everyone knew. That was a discussion among many people, not just myself. So that discussion still is open, I guess. I had a lot of other things. I wasn't even.
Well, I was wondering whether we ought to
I think
just go through this particular issue, and then
okay.
I'll come back to you
Okay.
after that. I mean, are there others who wanted to speak to this this issue? Next was Mr. Morris. Was that another issue?
It was one of them.
Okay. Can we keep this order and then we'll go back to it?
Yeah.
Sure, that's other things too. I value Rob's participation on the Urban Renewal Commission and others like him who are practitioners in the area. It seems, and actually, what you're quoting are the ethics laws. I believe as a state of Oregon, we all have to abide by them. We all have to declare now and then, as we sit as city commissioners, we're a small community essentially. So many of us have issues in various aspects of government, and that by recusing yourself from that activity, it seems to me is enough. The reason we're on an Urban Renewal Commission to help be the leader and a decision maker, and I think to add this statement is to diminish the ability to serve as a commissioner. So I think the normal ethics laws really cover that for me. I have other things, but
Commissioner West was next, and then Commissioner Messina after that.
I'll be brief. I think that the current language that we have is sufficient also, and that
The current language,
as of 2009,
at least the one that before we're changing.
not the proposed amendment, the proposed changes. I think it's sufficient enough for the reasons said by Commissioner Neely and Commissioner Norris. And then I'll get back on my next step too.
Commissioner Messina?
Okay, my perspective is a little different on this. I don't think this proposed section 2 is strong enough. I really think that if you're a sitting Urban Renewal Commissioner, you should not be able to apply for grants, period. Just limiting to the extension to storefront grants, the potential perception of conflict of interest is, I think, wider than concerning just storefront grants. And the policy decision on this body that has troubled me more than anything since I've been on the commission has been what I thought was a supremely unfortunate and irresponsible decision to subsidize the developers of the Cove to the tune of $1.2 million for their own architectural and engineering consultants fees. And so I think it's a conflict of interest if someone who's anticipating if there's a potential appearance of a conflict of interest or possible concrete conflict of interest, if someone who's anticipating later applying for several tens of thousands of dollars in storefront grants, when something like this $1.2 million subsidy comes along the line, it's only human nature to wonder whether, gosh, if I don't go with the program on this $1.2 million subsidy, are the powers not going to smile upon me when I come in for my couple of $10,000 grants? And even if there's nothing but perception, public confidence, I think, requires that no one be in that situation to even have that perception. So I think Section 2 should be amended to prohibit any sitting Urban Renewal Commission member from applying for any grant from the Urban Renewal Commission.
Do we have any more on this particular? I've lost the list now on my computer, so.
Well, I'm simply going to move to strike the amendment.
Okay, do you want to do that now or continue our discussion on everything?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion to second to strike section 2 on resolution number UR 10-02. Do we need more discussion? Commissioner Walters?
I would like to support what Commissioner Cena just said. I also agree that my position is that no commissioner should be eligible to receive the funds simply because I view this as a public service, and I think it's a temporary position that we all fill. It's a privilege that we serve, and I have no arguments about the merits of Commissioner Crocker's projects, and I support what he's doing. But I think it's inappropriate for commissioners to benefit while serving on the Urban Renewal Commission. So I also would prefer to see it strengthened as opposed to eliminated.
Okay, do we have any other comments? Commissioner Neely?
I'll just make it more general. If the city commission moves to reduce the property taxes, they benefit in having the taxes reduced. I mean, decisions that are made at the city commission level are things that affect them as well. And I think it's imperative that the other commissioners go ahead and evaluate other grant participants independent of any decisions that are made on an application that's made by a member of this particular body. And I think we can do that.
Okay, are these speakers now on this amendment that are listed?
No,
okay. Then was it Commissioner Smith that had his hand up? Or Mr. Frazier?
Well, I have a question mostly because I don't know the history of what occurred here.
You got your hand here.
Have commissioners on the Urban Renewal Commission applied for grants? I'm assuming they have applied for grants in the past under this program. And when they applied for those grants under this program, has it been the past practice that they also voted, or did they step down?
Ethics laws require that.
That's what
okay.
They didn't wait against each other, so
right.
So that was essentially.
And then, of course, did they? I'm assuming then that they also voted though on other applications when they stepped down. Okay. And so it seems to me what I'm seeing two sides, and the poor commissioners that hired me know I'm always looking for consensus. That I see two extremes on this argument, and I see something in the middle that is where I'm naturally attracted to that, like a moth to light, because I like to see things that can be workable and both sides can get something out of it. So it does seem like the language that's in front of you as a proposal is sort of striking that middle balance. And, I just wanted to mention that that's my observation, although it's certainly the Commission's majority decision on how they want to pursue it. Well, I think it's the language that's been proposed there in section 2. What it does is it doesn't go as far as Commissioner Nacita has suggested, which is that they can't apply, period. What it's saying is that they can apply, they just can't vote on their application or anyone else's during the pendency of that year. And so it does go a little bit further than the state ethics law as far as that prohibition, but it doesn't go as far as Commissioner Nacita suggested. So this would allow them to apply, but you kind of almost have to know going in, look, if I apply, I'm not going to be voting. Not only on mine, but anybody else's. So you sort of made that decision up front. If you want to apply for one of these, you kind of know up front that you're not going to be voting on any of them. That's what Section 2 does for you or to you, or that's what it does. And I think it just goes a little bit further, maybe one step further than the state ethics law. And if you're going to err on the side of one or the other, that's something you have to decide.
Mr. Crawford.
Yeah, I just want to make a point. To be honest with you, in regards to me personally, I really don't care. I really don't. But I want to make the comment that adding this is not going to prevent somebody who has ill will from applying for a grant. All I'm going to do is I'm going to find a partner. I'm going to say, hey, start this LLC, apply for this grant, and I'll vote on it. I'll discuss it. I'll push for it. I'll vote on it. It's not going to prevent anyone from getting around this rule if they want to. If they have ill will and they have malice in their heart, they're just going to go around it. So here, you guys are getting so wrapped up in perception when you're losing the real objective is to have good people who are honest on the Urban Renewal Commission using good judgment and common sense. If you guys want to put this in, that's fine. I'm not going to do it, but it's not going to prevent anyone from getting around that and applying for a grant. It's just not. So if you want to put it in there, that's fine. But it's not going to prevent what you guys are trying to prevent. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay,
It's very clear.
Mr. Neely, did you have something?
No, I did, but I think it's better said by
Any other discussion? Okay, shall we vote on the amendment?
The motion is to do away with the wording.
Right, the amendment, well, is to amend the resolution to do away with item, section 2.
How do I withdraw my second? Or not?
You withdraw your second, I guess.
Well, okay, I'm not gonna, I'd be willing to change in the spirit of compromise.
I'm not going to withdraw my motion.
I'll second.
Sorry.
If you want to, shall we vote?
Okay, so let me make sure I'm understanding everything here. So, you can apply for a grant if you're on the Urban Renewal Commission, and you can wait other grants if you vote yes for this motion.
I would assume that in the particular period, like if this is 3 times a year and your grant is a part of a package that's being looked at, you would have to recluse yourself from all the grants in that period. I mean, that would be state law. If correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Biden. Yeah.
Because if it's over, and that's the other ones too.
I haven't seen the proposal and looked at it, but certainly what is going on is that, let's say you get 20 grants for a certain number of dollars.
Well, the dollars are the way they've proposed is going to be 3 times a year, and they're going to break it evenly 3 times a year.
So one of those times there's 20 grants,
okay.
And one of those is yours. And in order to make a decision on any grant, you must evaluate and consider yours. Then yes, state ethics law would prevent you from doing that. But if they're evaluated independently, then no, state ethics law.
Well, they're going to be ranked, so that means that you could be a part of any.
They have to evaluate their own grant application. They can't do that.
Well, if they're ranking all of them or had a part in that, that would be an implication on their own grant application. So I would assume that would be against
their participation. Let's say you have 20 applicants, and everybody ranks them 1 to 20, except for one of the commissioners wants to rank 1 to 19 and just not address theirs. I don't think that's acceptable because their input would affect the way in which the other one. Their input would help determine where they got granted. If they're ranked independently, and each one is ranked, this one needs 7 out of 10 on this scale and 8 out of 10 on that scale, and so that each one is evaluated independently, then there may not be an issue. I mean, and the devil's in the details to a certain extent, but it's something that you've got to pay attention to.
Mr. Freeman.
And just to sort of dovetail off on what Mr. Kabizman was saying, the idea that an LLC or somebody else that is a partner, I think the state ethics law already addresses that, so that would have to be disclosed as well. If it inures to community benefit to you, even if it's indirect, you've got issues there. So.
Commissioner Neely.
I want to. My motion is a change. I want to really understand what's here. I would say that if a person, in a granting period, excuses themselves, but then is not able to participate, it wouldn't be only in that one. I guess you're doing it every 3 times a year, is that right? It would apply to the next ones too, because it's a fixed amount of money. The fact that the money's gone to an individual then would have precluded the monies being done later on. And so let me extend the argument. Okay. Say I'm a property owner. I didn't apply, and all of a sudden I've got something I would like to apply for. Haven't applied before within the first, third, second, third. I can't apply in the fourth, third, even though I didn't, even if I didn't, because I've already, because.
Already voted.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Participated.
So I'm out no matter what.
You know, and then have to look at the program. Let's say you're a property owner, you voted first, second. Those first and second votes are not directly to pecuniary benefit or not. Because at that point you haven't applied.
But you've affected the pool.
You have affected the pool, but it's not to your direct pecuniary benefit.
Or they could use that as a strategy.
They could use that as a strategy.
Yeah, you can use that as a strategy.
Or they
You know-
vote on the third quarter
That's
and
right.
apply for that.
Yep.
So it affects all of them. That's the part that really is hard to grasp and figure out how.
You know, again, it
Give
gets
me that, Crocker. I'm
Again,
sorry.
again, it comes to my comment that where this man is a slippery slope. It really is, because every single one of us here knows people who either own a business or own properties downtown on Main Street. Every single one of us. I mean, seriously, if we're going to go down this route, truly, Commissioner Peterson can't be involved because he has property listed on Main Street. Commissioner Slack cannot be involved because he owns a building on Main Street. Commissioner Nacita cannot be involved because he lives in the urban renewal area and he could benefit from walking down the elevator and going to a restaurant that he wants to see fixed up. This is a real slip. Like I said, if you're more concerned about perception than actually making things happen downtown, that's fine. I'm cool with it. But I'm just saying, you know, good things are happening, and here you guys are trying to put it out with all these, you want to tie it up in red tape and stuff. And if people have ill will, yeah, it would be against ethics laws to set up a separate LLC and do it. But you could sign a backdeal thing saying, look, go ahead and do this. I'm going to go ahead and we're coming up with a contract price right now, and I'll buy it from you in 5 years after all this thing blows over. I mean, come on. If people are going to be crooked, they're going to be crooked, and this isn't going to prevent it. So if you're more concerned about perception, that's fine. If you really want to make this a usable tool for economic development, $1.2 million as a direct result of those urban renewal grants that T5 Equities has taken advantage of. Totally ethical, above board. The equivalent of over 70 full-time jobs on Main Street. And that experience I got from doing those makes me a much better leader on the Urban Renewal Commission than had I not done. I have much more experience in doing that stuff than anyone here on this commission. And what you're saying is you don't want me a part of it. Or anyone else, for that matter. Commissioner Peterson, Commissioner Slack. So I just think, you know, if that's what you guys want to do, that's cool, but, you know, you're really trying to say
Mr. Fraser.
Can I ask another question? I'm fascinated by what this discussion is because I wasn't here to see the program working. But do you believe that the program wouldn't work if members weren't? In other words, if that amendment happened and you just couldn't vote, you may have still gotten the grants, right?
I didn't vote.
Okay, so yeah. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, do you think it'll stop the program? Because
I won't be able to have any input on anything. That's what I'm saying. You will lose my insight. You will lose my leadership on these things. And anyone who's actually does the work will not be able to be a part of this board. So we'll have people who have no idea. It's all just, you know, outside perception with no real world experience.
Commissioner Wilson.
For a little more background information, our Urban Renewal is 5 city commission and 5 members of the community who are property owners, business owners. It is their business input that we are looking for. So if we, I'm kind of leaning back to my other way now, because really we would be discouraging any business. How would you do it? You wouldn't be able to, because that's who you want your other 5 citizen people to be, as business owners. Wow.
Commissioner, Mr. Walters.
I guess I'm surprised that this is going in this direction too. I mean, we're really only just trying to prevent somebody who is competing for the same funds from voting, taking votes that would potentially conflict with public interest versus private interests. And we're really only talking about one fiscal year at a time assuming that anybody is interested in applying for a grant. So, I mean, when you talk about this restriction, I mean, you've extended it well beyond what it really is, and I think we need to be more honest about what we're talking about. We're really only talking about temporary restriction. Nobody, if Commissioner Crocker does not care about the grants, it shouldn't make any difference at all. We don't know that other projects would not have accomplished the same goals, if not more. We don't know that. I do know that I feel very uncomfortable voting yes for a fellow commissioner to receive funds from this body. It makes me uncomfortable.
Anything else? Will we vote? Somebody have something?
Vote.
Vote.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Commissioner Nocita?
No.
Commissioner Neely?
Yes.
Commissioner West?
Yes.
Commissioner Morris?
Yes.
Commissioner Crocker?
Yes.
Commissioner Walters?
No.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yes.
Chair Slack?
Yes. So that would be 6, 4, and 3 against. The motion passes. Okay. Where are we at? Commissioner Smith?
Thank you. Okay, so I've been through this so many times, but I still have a couple of questions, and maybe some typos to fix or something. I don't think we're under where it says maximum grant amount on the opening part of the storefront requirements. It says for each structure up to $20,000, and then in parentheses for a total project cost of $40,000. That's not written right?
Right.
Because it implies that there's two separate structures. So we're saying for each project they have up to $20,000 unless they meet these other. So that needs to be reworded. It's not right. Okay, the next question I have, and I probably don't want to open up that can of worms, but I just was thinking about it because the last I guess weighting the projects individually will probably weed something like this out anyway. But there was some debate over the last grant about whether we should be using it for painting solely, and so and painting's in here as one of the things. So I mean that probably weeds itself out in the process in itself, because we're going to say, well, this grant is going to benefit this building more than just painting on this grant, so maybe that's not something you need to worry about pulling out there. But the other thing is, it specifically mentions, we talked about the importance of not funding tenant signs with the fact that they may be gone in a year, so it's not spending our money well. But the only exemption that's linking tenant signs is linked to awnings, and so when it goes on to the next sentence and talks about signs and graphics, that says nothing about tenant signs or graphics that aren't on awnings. And so, I still think that that's maybe a concern, and that's why the whole discussion came about if the sign grants that we're going to have still stay under this process, or is going to be separate, because I really think the money shouldn't be spent on signs for tenants. If it's a sign saying, such and such historic building, and it's going to stay in that building for year after year, then that, I think, should qualify. But specific tenant signs, I'm not sure should qualify. So I think that needs to be talked about a little bit. The next question, this is just a question probably for staff, was when it talks about, we're talking about to get the max grant of $40,000, it has to really be tied to the fact that you're bringing this building back to some historic context, and that would be done with research from the photographs and other documentation. I'm assuming that's referencing like inventory forms, right? Okay, because a lot of the inventory forms talk about facades, etc., of the original. But the one question I'm not sure of, there was inventory forms done in 1983 and redone in 2009. Which one supersedes the other? I'm assuming that 2009 inventory forms supersede the 1983 forms. So do the 1983 inventory forms are not used in any way? Or is it a combination of the two together?
That's where judgment comes.
The reason I'm asking this is because looking at the inventory forms, most of the 2009 inventory forms are blank. When the 1983 inventory forms go into paragraph after paragraph about each building's history. That concerns me. Also, the dates on the original buildings, and this is for houses and buildings in downtown, the dates on the 1983 inventory forms are not consistent with the 2009 inventory forms. In fact, what you see is most of the 2009 inventory forms have been rounded up. So if you have 1913 houses, and then you look at the 2009 inventory forms, most of them have been updated to 1920s. So I'm really concerned about that because the inventory forms from 1983 haven't continued on to the 2009 forms, and if we're using those forms, then we are erasing history. And so we need to check up on that because I'm really concerned about that. I've been reading each building in Oregon City's history, and none of them, very few of them, are actually on the 2009 inventory forms. Well, I'm just referring to this, where it says for grants over $20,000, an applicant must demonstrate how the proposed improvements will restore the facade to its original design, and how we're going to do that, how we're going to make that determination is by using photographs or other documentation, which would be the inventory form.
Okay, got it.
And there may be other forms.
Right.
It depends if you want any discretion at all. I mean, you can write this so nobody has to think at all.
That specific issue, could I just a minute? Maybe you can do something with wording such as best information or something of that indication to say we need evidence, whether it be two different inventory forms or something else that gives us the best information.
Okay, a couple more things here. Okay, so if a grant comes to us and we decide that it deserves the full $40,000, is that same applicant okay to come back the next year for another $40,000 for the same building, maybe, or for the same project, or not again? I don't know that that's been really talked about. It's kind of mentioned a little bit here. And then the last thing is the last page that talks about work shall be consistent with the application. Any changes must be approved in advance by Community Development Department. And we've had that discussion mainly because certain grants have been voted on and then changed later on, and we've still awarded the money. So if it's a small change, to me, if it's a huge change, like the fact that here's the grant and this is what I'm doing, and then later on they decide to change it, then that should come to us as a commission, not staff. So there has to be communication. So, I mean, there's obviously some determinations that staff can decide on, like what type of concrete they're using for the sidewalk. If they said aggregate and they're not going to use that, I mean, that's not something that probably has to come to us. But there has to be more specific mention here to the conversation that's happening between the decision makers and staff to make sure that we're not awarding something and then it's drastically changing later on. And so I have concerns on that. And then just in terms of the criteria form, the only thing that I would say on that is on the criteria form, even if they score really high on the criteria form, let's say, almost full points, except for maybe they were cut off on the building's historic compatibility, they're still not qualified to get the full $40,000 because that $40,000 is tied to only a criteria number 4. It's not, that $40,000 is not tied to all of criteria A. It's only just that one piece of it. So I'm curious about that. Because let's say they do everything under A, and they get, let's say, a 4 because maybe they don't meet historic whatever, and then they get 5s on everything else, and so they score really high. That alone doesn't mean that they're going to get the $40,000 fully, right?
Well,
But
I'm assuming for one thing, the score doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna get anything. That's an indicator for us in our packets
Right.
as a commission to look at and make, we're gonna make the final judgment.
Right.
So.
Just clarifying.
Well, I don't know,
I mean,
the rest of the commission, I mean,
well,
that's,
the $40,000, I'm just clarifying that the
Yeah.
$40,000 is only tied to the historic aspect and nothing else.
Commissioner.
I guess it bothered me a little bit, that first statement, for a total project cost of $40,000. I assume that was initially intended to deal with the 50% match. I don't think, I think you indicated it there, you don't need that for a total project cost of $40,000, where the change might occur is in terms of the historic thing, and that has to be dealt down there only. And I would suggest on the very first statement under the maximum grant amount, just X out for a total project cost of $40,000. I think that was intended to refer to the potential 50% match. That's already given down below, and I think we got to keep the money separate there. So it's understood that more than $20,000 can be granted if, in fact, it's a historic restoration, and so I would suggest that amendment be made.
And I don't know who's
I
next.
think it's me.
Mr. Norris?
Thank you. First of all, on the purpose under the program, it says downtown urban renewal district. I think that downtown should be struck as to me that it
That's
was
right.
7th Street. So I think we're actually almost any place that says downtown should be
Exactly.
eliminated. So I'm also some little things, but I don't need to get into those. But we talked about wanting to in the 1/3 series that we're talking about doing that of prioritizing the grants, and I don't really see that we provided a way to do that. For instance, in our CCIT grants, Oregon City Safe Improvement Trust grants and our Metro Enhancement grants, we sort of rank them against each other. So, what happens to these scoring sheets? Are they for our personal interest only, or do we turn them into someone who creates a spreadsheet of ranks like we do in the grant programs? That piece is not clear to me, because it seemed in our discussion around the table that it was our intent, and as we discussed the conflict of interest issue, that we were ranking one against the other, which is a change of procedure for us.
But that was the question I had, though, is this form, it wasn't clear to me whether this form was to be done by staff or whether that was to be done by us.
That was my other question.
I mean, I understood that we were gonna rank, but I wasn't sure that this form was the method that we were gonna do that. And we probably ought to have some method that we're all using, which is the same, so.
The intent was to have a form that was consistent for both the staff and the staff reports and your evaluation.
So we would use this as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
The staff and
Okay.
okay.
The other thing I want to comment about is, this is not an ordinance that's going to be codified. It's a process and procedural guide. So
Subject to change as we move along.
Yeah, we can change it. If it's not going well, just give me a call.
Commissioner Neely?
I think you want
Are you-
the majority of the body before you change anything. But in any case, it is an action under the red line case. It is on the document Main Street design. And you have certain things that say recommended, not recommended. And under the non-recommended, you have in quotes themed historic. And I guess if I see that, I think, well, we've got a structure. It's not historic, but they want to do something in it to make it a little historic. Why is that not recommended?
Well, again, there's a lot of discretion in this, but let's say we wanted all the buildings to look like wagons and wagon wheels, or we wanted a theme of Bavaria.
So you're talking about something that's a theme throughout, not the fact that an individual has a project they want done on a non-historic building, but they want to look at historic. That's not included in what you term themed historic. you're talking about something like Leavenworth maybe, where they've done something for the whole place. What I'm suggesting is we give a little definition of what we mean by themed historic, because you may have somebody that's coming forward with a specific project. They want for their own project a theme, individual theme, that does bring in some historic aspects of it. So I think we got to clarify the wording.
May I make a suggestion, and that is that we try to complete the specific guidelines and the evaluation, and that there's Main Street guidelines, which could take a whole night by itself. That's not totally necessary for continuing into the new fiscal year for the grants.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we set that aside for a future agenda item.
Fine.
Okay. Is there anybody else? Commissioner West?
I don't think mine has. My comment or question has to is to the Main Street design. Mine is a little clarification. So if we give out 100,000 a year, what if everybody applies in the first quarter, and you want to give out the grants 3 times a year? So what are you going to tell 2/3 of the people that apply in the first quarter, and how are you going to rank who gets the grant that quarter and who's going to put it on? Put it off.
That's why there are specific dates specified. So we bring the grants to you as they came in. So if we had enough grants for, a third or over a third of the total amount for that fiscal year, then we'd probably bring those to you.
So the first quarter, the only grant comes in is for 40,000. We do it. We look at it.
It's a good chat. Yeah, if it ranked high, I would think we would.
Oh, okay.
Anybody else? We have a motion on. Are we approving, or we have a motion? Is that for the application process and requirements, including the form and?
Yeah, the intent was everything, but I heard a desire to get to the specific design guideline for Main Street at a later date.
Did we want to include the resolution in the motion as well, since we've amended it as it is amended?
I would like to see it rewritten. I mean, I know this is putting off another time, but we've made several suggestions, and I personally would like to see a re-redlined version. So just to make sure the things that we've been concerned about are, in fact, memorialized and what we will vote on.
Okay. Well, that's going to stymie the beginning of.
I know.
Okay. Is everybody else in agreement with that? Do we want to wait?
That's okay.
Okay. So let's move on to, we're back to, we've done all of 5B. Is that correct? We've gone through all that. Let's go on back to item 5A, Commission contract for on-call services for urban renewal projects. Commission report for on-call services. Mr. Grantlaw?
This is just an update and some direction from you. Over the past several years, we've been using a consultant in the area of economic development, particularly as it has to do with the Rivers Project and the Cove Project. Also, we had some reports, a proposed report for downtown housing. We had a futures report that was done, I think the first one in 2004 by Leland Consulting. So the question is do we want to retain an on-call consultant for these type of projects? That's the first question. Do we want to? The second one, do we want to continue to use Dave Leland? And if the answer is no, do you want to send out a request for proposals?
Can you press your?
I did.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
No. I didn't do mine. I apologize. Commissioner Seaman. Now I'm on top of it.
I appreciate this agenda item because I think this discussion is valuable and probably a little overdue also. And what I would like to propose or just float a discussion on is Mr. Grantlaw has suggested one of the options being an RFQ. I would like to do something along that line, and I'm inspired in agreeing with that proposal by the recent city manager search we had, because I thought that was a terrific process. And I would think it would be a good idea to do an RFQ for an economic development strategist and consultant. And one of the things I think that could achieve is having maybe even in a forum with all of these, potential candidates present in a room, just like we had our city manager candidates in a room with the community and stakeholders, and let them prove that they're the best to be our consultant. And just one of the criteria I think would be a selection criteria is for them to give their analysis of what the state of the current world economy and national economy and local economy is, and how that should translate into a local economic development strategy for Oregon City. If folks go back to the 2004 economic development strategy and the 2006 implementation strategy, upon which the current urban renewal plan is based, all of that was based on the pre-2000, the economy before the crash, the pre-2008 bubble economy, which is just gone. So we're operating today on documents that I don't think are based in current economic reality anymore. And I think it's time to reset and rethink our economic development strategy for Oregon City based on what the reality is now. Maybe Mr. Leland is the guy to do that, but I would like to, I would like to open up an RFQ and have a number of candidates come in and give us an analysis, and have us decide which one is the most credible, has a track record, and help us reset and move forward in the economy that we're facing as we look ahead, not trying to continue with a strategy that I don't think has any reality or any basis in today's economic reality. So I'm all in favor of the RFQ idea as far as what Mr. Renewal has proposed.
Commissioner Norris.
I think we need Leland Consulting. I don't disagree with Commissioner Nocita that we need updating of our strategy, because clearly it isn't current. But what Leland Consulting brings is he's one of the very few people in the state of Oregon that really does that kind of work. The complexity of development in our North End, which is where we really need him, there's almost, again, as we've heard many times, there's almost nothing that's right about that particular area. So because of the complexity, the financial complexities, the fact that only certain developers can actually be considered for that area, and certain uses for an area that's in a floodplain and on a garbage dump requires a specialty area, and I think we would lose way too much time to change horses midstream now. And they again, the familiarity, the specialty work that they do throughout the United States, the services that they bring to Oregon City would keep us moving ahead. And I think it's just not the time to change horses.
Yeah, I guess I have mixed feelings about this. David Leland, of course, could make the application. We could look at it in that particular regard. I guess my mixed feelings really come from the notion of the kinds of things the Urban Renewal Agency would, and I'll refer to the landfill specifically because we have nothing going there at the moment. As to the kind of development that I would want to see there personally, and I'll be a little more specific. Whatever development goes on there, if they're going to actually seek Urban Renewal Agency funds, I would never want it to be a piecemeal thing. would want it to be a high value quality piece that could it come in fruition within, say, a 3, 4, 5 year period, as opposed to you do a piece here and then you do a piece there. If it goes that direction, I wouldn't be interested in really contributing urban renewal agency monies to it, because at one point we want the money to come back, and if we're doling out urban renewal agency funds over a long period of time, that's not going to happen. I guess my concern would be that whatever development is, it's a high-end development. It increases property values, and it does it in a reasonable short period of time. The urban renewal agency has been open for a long period of time, and I think we have to look for projects that are actually going to have to close it. We might want to redraw boundaries to deal with other blighted areas or whatever at a different period of time. I personally think David Leland could make that kind of, give us that kind of input, but maybe there are others that could do it just as well. So I'm just going to make that statement without making any conclusion at this point whether we ought to go with David Leland or we ought to open it up. The statement I would make, though, is I do believe we need a consultant. So it's a kind of a two-part question. On the first part, we need a individual with the ability, or an entity with the ability to deal with those kinds of issues. I think David Leland is a person that is a I don't know if we're talking about an individual or a company there, but is able to do it, but there may be others that are able to as well. But I do believe we need a consultant, and what I've done is given kind of my vision of what I expect to happen at the landfill.
Mr. Crocker.
Yeah, I think for me, in theory, I agree with Commissioner Nocita. I think it's never a bad idea to look at different folks and different perspectives and see what else is out there. In practice, however, with everything that's gone on in the last, I don't know, how many years has the North End been going on? 8, 6, 7, whatever? 10, 20? I think Mr. Leland has so much institutional knowledge. I mean, he's been dealing with this for so long. He knows so many of the pitfalls and the traps, and we've already invested so much money in that knowledge that he's gleaned that I tend to agree. I think switching horses midstream would only prove to be more detrimental than it would positive. Coming from a professional service provider like I am too, I think getting a bunch of highly paid professionals to come into a room, into a mosh pit, and duke it out, and basically provide what in essence is, free consulting usually doesn't work, because the best people don't have to do that. They don't. I don't do RFPs because I have too many great clients who know the value of what I provide, and they call me and they say, here's our budget, here's what we need to get done, and I need your help. And I think a lot of times you get all those people together, you're not getting the best. I truly believe that, and I think I don't think Mr. Leland is necessarily the best. He may be, he may not be, I don't know. But I think we've already invested so much money in the knowledge that he's gleaned from everything that we've gone through that I don't think it would behoove us to look to another consultant. Now, what I would like to see is him come to us and say, look, here's what I've seen has changed, here's what I know what's going on, and here's a plan that I would like to put in place, and do that, say, look, we're looking at renewing you, we want to know what you're going to do before we sign you on, so we can evaluate that. But I don't know that full-on RFQ is really in our best interest. I want to add too, I think there were some things towards the end that Mr. Leland was proposing that I thought were unnecessary, like some of the window dressing workshops and stuff that he wanted to charge us for. I didn't think they were necessary, because I think the Main Street organization is taking on a lot of those things that Mr. Leland was proposing. But I think if we have a very clearly structured outline and plan for what we would like him to do, I think it would behoove us to re-engage Mr. Leland and at least let him know that we're interested in renegotiating another contract.
Mr. Smith.
I agree with Commissioner Neely, and I guess in some sense Commissioner Nacita, because we open this up, Leland Consulting can be part of that process, and if we decide that we're going to go forward, then we go forward. If we find that there's other people that are better, then we know that as well. I wrote down midstream question mark. I kind of thought we weren't really midstream, we're like at the end of the river. So, we're not midstream, the stream has changed. We have to relook at this, and, maybe we want to continue on, maybe we don't, but it's time to start asking that question.
Commissioner West.
Yes, I think we need a consultant, part one, and part two, I'd like to see the services of Dave Leland's company be brought back again. And I'll just add my experience in the last couple of years working the synergy that they've built up within all the other community partners that have done economic development and research for us. For instance, the Marketech Group and Lakota Group on our Main Street program, that they've worked well. They've got all this background. And so as you say that, the river's changed right now, I could see that there's a kind of a new world reality here, Jim, with the market. But for the flip side of that is that's why I would like to stay with the same person, because they've already got the time is money, and these people have got the background and can help us. And that's exactly what they do, is figuring out how to change ships midstream here. So, or whatever ship is going to float is what they're going to steer us with. So, in the essence of money for the citizens of Oregon City, I'd like to save it and work with Dave Leland again, because he has all that background, and we don't have to spend the thousands of dollars familiarizing with him with all our plans.
Commissioner Nacita.
I'll kind of reiterate what Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Neely have said. If we hold an RFQ, Mr. Leland can certainly participate in it and can certainly be the one selected for it, but I cannot think that it would only be helpful, even to Mr. Leland, should he be the one selected, that having his challenges, his assumptions challenged and his ideas challenged and defended, that process can only be a strengthening one, even for him. And if we don't hold an RFQ, we don't know who's out there, and we preclude the possibility that someone truly visionary and spectacular might compete for that job, just because we don't let the possibility happen by not having the RFQ.
Mr. Neely.
I'll make a suggestion that, assuming David Leland is going to do this, that we retain his services through the end of this year. Your renewal agency is going to change next year, no matter what. There's going to be some changes. And that we retain his services through the end of the year because of the familiarity of history. And then with a new urban renewal, at least certain members of the Urban Renewal Commission that will be coming on next year, go ahead and put forward the motion of an RFQ at that particular time. That's my recommendation.
Commissioner Walters?
I have a little bit more basic question, and that is, I don't even know if we've defined what the work is. And so without knowing what the work is, it's hard for me to say whether it should go to an RFQ or whether it should stay with the current, or whether we might even want to split up the work so that it might go to more than one party. I would like to see what is the scope of work, and then we can make a decision, is this the correct scope of work? And then we go through the selection process based on whatever it is that is anticipated. I would like to see some fresh perspectives. Personally, I'd like to see an opportunity to maybe create some other opportunities outside of what we've already seen.
Mr. Crocker?
In light of Commissioner Walters' comments, I don't know that I disagree with her. I think that's a great idea. The only caveat is, look how long it's taken us to get the guidelines. I mean, it could take us a year to get scope of work together. I mean, seriously. That said, I also see merit in Commissioner Neely's recommendation that we retain Leland through the end of the year, and then at the end of the year we can reevaluate. And, you know, actually what Commissioner Nocita said gave me pause a little bit. I guess I would agree that having somebody challenge assumptions of Dave Leland might be good for him. So, but I think if we were to do an RFQ, I would really strongly want to encourage Mr. Leland to be a part of it. I would want to make sure that it wasn't that we felt he wasn't doing a good job, but more so that we just wanted to make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck, and strongly encourage that he indeed apply. Because I truly believe that institutional knowledge that we've already paid him to acquire is so valuable. And you're right, it would be a total waste of taxpayers and citizens' money if we didn't try and take advantage of that. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'd love the scope of work. I think it might take too long. I agree with Commissioner Neely. I think maybe the best thing is just to retain him to the end of the year. And then at that time, I don't disagree with Commissioner Nocita that we should invite some other people to challenge the assumptions. So I guess I'm in agreement with the commissioners.
Commissioner Nocita.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion just so maybe we can move this forward, and if it dies, I guess we can consider an alternative. But I'm going to move to continue this item to the next Urban Renewal Commission and ask staff to come back with us with the cost of an RFQ, and a first blush attempt at a scope of work per Commissioner Walters' comments.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second with discussion.
I guess my discussion would be,
How's my order here?
no, excuse me.
We got to see Commissioner Norris never got a chance to talk, but were you going to talk to the motion?
I certainly can.
Okay.
I think my comments are relevant. I like the idea of retaining Leland Consulting through the end of the year. And, there are a couple of reasons I think that we need him particularly, and the services of the company. Particularly, we have two active developers vying for the private development of a landfill. And sorting that out is going to require someone that knows the parties, that knows those issues, and that can work, is known to have a style that can work with that. I agree. I think there are many people that can do the strategic update and give us some new perspectives on the strategic plan that in all the other areas. But dealing with the landfill areas specifically, where we have a private developer and we're a partner, but we don't drive the ship only, I don't think we have expertise on staff that can do the work that Leland does. And as far as I can hear in the region, he is one of the very few, again, in Oregon, who can do that specific kind of work. So for that reason, I really don't support this motion, and would like to really see us retain Leland for the end of the year. I think that's a good suggestion.
Commissioner Neely?
No, I think that's, I'll just withdraw. I guess something to the effect, I'll withdraw.
You withdraw.
My comments.
Oh.
I'm up. I just withdrew my need to speak.
Okay, do we have any other discussion on the motion? The motion is, let's restate the motion because I've kind of lost you for a minute.
To continue 5A to the next meeting, and to include a cost for the RFQ and a draft scope of work.
Okay. Everybody understand that? Shall we have a vote, please?
Commissioner Smith?
I'm sorry, wait a minute.
I just want to clarify what it is we're trying to achieve, because I'm a little bit, on the one hand, if we bring back an RFQ, I guess what you see on your agenda is we're looking for direction from you on whether or not, because right now we don't have an on-call consultant. So Dan, we don't have that service available to us from any particular party. So I guess one of the things I'm thinking is that you could authorize an on-call consultant for a period of time for the staff's work. Then if it turns out to be one of these parties or some different party, that person can come back, and if the commission wants to retain them to do more things, you could talk about what that scope of work should be, what it is you want from that firm, what it is you want the consultant to achieve. Because I'm actually not, I want our staff to have access to some consulting services, but I don't want our staff to drive the process about what it is you want from the consultant. Does that make sense? So I want either that person that we use for the staff consultant to come forward and entertain a discussion with you about whether they want to do the work, what they can do, what they can offer. You can still have that discussion, or we can kind of take a time out and bring back an RFQ. But I just want to make sure I understand what it is we're trying to achieve with that RFQ, because one is an on-call consultant service for our staff to use, and the other one is the bigger project about what happens on these sites, and the developers, and how it can all work out together. Does that make sense? There's kind of two different things that you're looking at that could be done by the same firm or different firms.
So, just curious, how does it work now? How does work get assigned? Does it get assigned through some central point of contact? Or, I mean, what I'm concerned about is that little tasks can come in and hours can add up, and, you know, at the end, we haven't really been very strategic in terms of how we've approached our capital that we have, and it's, you know, we have a small budget, and this has been a pretty large part of our operating expense, and I just want to make sure that we make good use of the money, and so I guess I'm curious how that would work when services are needed. Who makes that determination, and is there a cap on the work orders, or how do you scope those individual projects?
Well, it's a combination of the city manager and myself, depending on the task and the complexity and whether we have the resources to do the project. So it's pretty discretionary. It's just like any other consultant the city would hire. You know, we hired consultants to do our concept plans and our comprehensive plans, for example, several years ago. So it's just a matter of the task and the time that we have available.
Mr. Smith.
This is just clarification. I think I understood. I thought the motion was just to bring back an estimate of how much an RFQ would be, not bringing back the RFQ, right?
Right. Right. But the implication there, I think, is that rather than hiring somebody on an interim basis as a consultant, we're going to go through an RFQ process to do that. Am I correct? Is that what the motion was?
Yes, it was. Although the subsequent discussion, I think, is not mutually exclusive, because I think we can still go through the process of costing out an RFQ for, you know, whether the future be 2 months from now or.
So when we get that information back, we would vote at that time whether to move forward on an RFQ, and we look at the scope of work.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Neely was next.
I mean, I guess I have no problem with RFQ. I guess my problem is where is the decision ultimately going to be made, because you go through a process and so forth, and then you have a new commission sitting here, and if it's by that time the RFQ is going for them, and they take a look at it, if we take a look at it, then a new commission may not be that satisfied with it. You're given kind of a deadline of next time. My preference is actually to separate the two issues. I could support voting for what you're putting forward, but I think the on-call consultant is a different issue, and I would then put forward a different motion.
That's possible. We could vote on this one, and then someone else could.
Commissioner West, do you want to say something?
I'd like to separate the two too, and well, I know I'm as confused on Jim's, because we still need a non-call consultant today, so we can't wait for an RFQ and for a decision on that. So there's a motion on the floor, so you can't make another one. But
let's vote on the motion on the floor, and then.
What will the motion on the floor allow us to have an on-call consultant?
I think that's the next motion.
Yes, but that will be a subsequent motion.
I think that's a subsequent motion. You want to call the roll?
Commissioner Smith? Aye. Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West? Aye. Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Crocker?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters? Aye. Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Chair Slack?
Aye, that'll be 9-0, the motion passes. And we have another motion.
Yeah, so I'm gonna move, for the remainder of, the calendar year to retain an on-call consultant and leave it to the discretion of staff as to who, or I guess who includes the singular or plural, who the consultant or consultants may be.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for staff to select an on-call consultant or consultants, and for them to have the discretionary to choose who that is. If we have any discussion on that, Commissioner Norris.
I see our city manager looking a little uncomfortable. I think staff is looking for direction. So I mean, I would like to add an amendment that it be legal consulting. I think that's.
I agree. I have no problem, but then you have good reason to hire somebody else for a different aspect. So I guess I'd expect our city manager to address that issue. I mean, it may be that Leland can deal with most of the issues we're going to concerned about, but you still may want to have somebody else on call to deal with another issue.
Yes, but there are other consultants that we can contact if we're in a position where we don't think an existing consultant is getting the job done. We can reach out to other people.
And I think it's your discretion that Leland Consulting is the appropriate entity to use. That's up to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I would like to know if the commission is comfortable using that consultant, because I think what you're going to need to do, especially if you're looking at the next 6 months till the end of the year, that consultant's going to need to come here and have a discussion with you about what it is you want to achieve in those next 6 months or however long you're working here.
Well, okay.
So I actually don't want to be the person that picks.
I'll amend my motion to hire Leland, that you may hire Leland Consultant and others as you need.
Till the end of the year.
Till the end of the year.
Wait a minute. We have an attorney.
He's just itchy to say something.
Yeah, and specifically selecting a consultant may run into problems with some public contracting issues that require competition. I haven't looked at this. When you're dealing with consultants like this, there are reasons that may allow us to directly appoint because Leland may have already done substantial work on this. There are some other things, but I want to be careful about selecting this and running into public contracting issues.
I like my first motion.
I'll
take my amendment away.
Commissioner Lester, you? No? Commissioner Walters?
Yes, being a public procurement person, I do know that I don't have enough information or staff recommendation to vote on a sole source contract with Mr. Leland tonight. So I would like to at least see that supporting documentation given to us before we make a vote on a sole source contract with anyone.
Commissioner,
I would like to ask Mr. Verweisman if you feel that Commissioner Neely's original motion, opening up to anybody staff is comfortable with, satisfies the public contracting issue, because I think Commissioner Neely's motion is broad enough that they can proceed in selecting consultants, knowing that they have to do so within the parameters of the public contracting code.
I didn't hear anything in Commissioner Neely's original motion that I saw a problem with.
Well, then, I'll go back to the original motion.
I'm not certain there's a problem with Leland, but I have enough hesitation to say.
Okay, so then
you take an on-call contractor or contractors to the end of the year. If you have the authority to do that.
I second that. You're okay with that? Okay, do we have other discussion? Shall we have the vote, please?
Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West? Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters? Commissioner Peterson? Chair Slack?
Aye, that would be 8-0 motion passed.
We have another meeting, so we're going.
I know, but I think we do want to do the budget.
Can we
where is that something that's going to take us a while, or?
We have to approve
Every time you're experienced with this, how do you think?
Do you have another urban renewal commission meeting scheduled before?
Do we have another urban renewal commission scheduled before the end of the year?
Fiscal year.
I think we'll have one on June 16th. Wednesday?
Will this?
I would like
Well,
to.
it won't hold over, we'll have to renotice everything and.
We
much
need to
that
move
cost?
forward. Go ahead.
Okay. What you have is a budget before you, Chairman Slack and Commissioners. This was the budget you approved at the April 27th Budget Committee meeting.
At what point do we have to announce the public hearing?
Right now.
Right now?
I'm just
Before you start your part, this public hearing related to budget for the next fiscal year. Sorry. Go ahead. You're okay.
Okay. Well, you have this is when the public speaks, right? Not when I'm speaking.
No, you got, I think, introduce it.
Okay. Well, again, you have the resolution to adopt the budget for 2010-11. It's the same budget you approved. The only change we made in the approval process was to put back in $10,000 for the Ermenfinger House. And on conclusion of the public hearing, you have a resolution to adopt the budget, make appropriations, and declare the tax increment.
Okay, so do we need a motion for?
Mr. Chairman,
After the public hearing.
After
yeah,
that.
you need to actually officially ask if there's a member of the public that wants to speak.
Okay, do we have any member of the public that wishes to speak?
You need to open the public hearing.
Well, I did open the public.
You did, okay. There we go.
Do we have it? Do we have anybody after the official gavel who wishes to speak from the public? Seeing none, then we'll move forward. Do we have to close the public hearing?
Yes.
The public hearing is closed. Go ahead.
Somebody needs to make a motion.
Yeah.
Sorry, Commissioner Norris.
Chair Flack, I move we adopt the urban renewal budget for fiscal year 2010-11.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion to second. We have discussion on the budget. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Smith? No. Commissioner Nocita?
No.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West? Aye. Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters? Aye. Commissioner Peterson? Aye. Chair Slack?
Aye. So that would be 6 in favor, 2 opposed, and the motion carries. Thank you very much.
Didn't that take too long?
And can we hold minutes over to the next meeting, the approval of minutes of May 5th? Anything else?
Second.
Motion for minutes and a second. Do we have a discussion? Can we take the vote on that?
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Norris?
Aye.
Commissioner Walters?
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson? Chair Slack?
Aye. That will be 8-4-0 against. The motion passes. And do we need anything else so we can adjourn? We're adjourned.